You know that feeling, right? Where you've given so much of yourself to work, to family, to just keeping up with everything that you end up completely drained.
Oh, yeah, running on fumes.
Exactly, like you're
Yep.
running on fumes. So today, we're diving deep into something that acts like an invisible shield in our demanding lives,
Mm.
setting healthy boundaries, specifically how they protect your energy.
It's crucial stuff.
It really is. Our mission in this deep dive is to really understand what these boundaries are, why they're absolutely critical for your mental and, emotional well-being. Think of them as your personal force field
Good way to put it.
and how you can practically put them in place across different parts of your life. We'll also look at some of the common hurdles we face.
It's not always easy.
Definitely not. And explore the fantastic knock-on effects they have on how you feel about yourself and, well, the quality of your relationships.
Yeah,
So if you've ever felt that constant pull and wondered how to carve out some space and energy just for you, this deep dive is definitely for you.
exactly. And when we talk about boundaries, what we're really discussing are the personal limits and guidelines that define how we interact with others.
Right. The rules of engagement, almost.
Kind of. It's not about shutting people out, though. It's more about establishing clear expectations for how we want to be treated and, what we're comfortable with.
Okay.
And a key element of healthy boundaries is being able to assert your needs and say no when necessary.
That tricky no word.
Right. While still maintaining your ability to connect with people authentically.
Okay, so let's unpack this idea of different types of boundaries. The sources mentioned a spectrum from what they called rigid to porous. Rigid boundaries. What does that look like when someone's, like, living with those?
Well, imagine someone with rigid boundaries almost has an invisible wall up, very high. They tend to avoid close relationships and intimacy, might find it really hard to ask for help, even when they need it.
So quite isolated.
Yeah, they usually have a very small circle of close friends. They're very protective of their personal information and can seem quite detached.
Mm.
And while this might feel like a way to stay safe, it can unfortunately lead to loneliness and, well, social isolation.
Okay. And then there are porous boundaries. This sounds like the opposite, maybe where the wall is too thin or not even there sometimes.
That's a great way to put it. Yeah.
What are some of the signs that someone might have porous boundaries? You know, that feeling of being maybe too involved in other people's stuff?
That nails it. With porous boundaries, individuals often overshare personal details very quickly.
Too much, too soon.
Exactly. They struggle to say no to requests almost like they feel obligated to agree to everything,
Hmm.
and they can become excessively involved in other people's problems, sometimes even taking on those problems as their own.
Oh, I see. That sounds draining.
It really is. They might also rely heavily on what others think of them to feel good about themselves and might put up with disrespect or even, in some cases, abuse because they fear being rejected.
Gosh.
And this pattern often leads to feeling completely drained, emotionally exhausted, and like they're constantly being taken advantage of.
So the sweet spot, the energy protecting zone we're aiming for, is in the middle. Healthy boundaries. What are the hallmarks of someone who has those?
Healthy boundaries are really all about balance and self-respect.
Yeah.
It means you value your own opinions and needs, and you can express them without feeling, guilty or like you're compromising your core values.
Okay.
You share personal information in a way that feels right for the relationship and the situation. Not too much, not too little.
Appropriate sharing.
Right. You understand your own needs and can communicate them effectively to others. And importantly, you're also able to accept when other people set boundaries with you and say no to your requests without taking it personally.
Ah, that's a key point, too. It goes both ways.
Absolutely. And it's worth remembering, most of us probably have a mix of these boundary styles, right?
Yeah.
And what's appropriate can really depend on the specific context, the
Yeah.
people involved, and even cultural norms.
That makes total sense. Now, the sources also broke down boundaries into different categories, like physical, emotional, time, and so on. This really helped me picture how boundaries work in different areas of life. Let's start with physical boundaries. It's not just about personal bubble size, is it?
You're right. It goes beyond just personal space. Physical boundaries involve your comfort level with physical touch and how close people get to you.
Okay.
For example, someone with healthy physical boundaries might be perfectly comfortable with a handshake, but maybe not a hug from someone they don't know well.
Right. Depends on the person and the situation.
Exactly. Or they might feel uneasy if someone stands too close during conversation. It's all about your personal sense of what feels safe and respectful regarding your physical body and space.
Then we have emotional boundaries. This one feels really key when we're talking about protecting our energy. How do we define healthy emotional boundaries?
Think of emotional boundaries as the lines you draw to protect your feelings, and crucially, to recognize that you are not responsible for the emotions of other people.
That's a big one. Taking on others' feelings.
It is. For instance, if someone speaks to you in a condescending or disrespectful way, a healthy emotional boundary would be to address that behavior or, remove yourself from the situation.
Okay.
Similarly, needing time alone to process your own emotions without feeling pressured to immediately comfort someone else is a sign of healthy emotional boundaries. It's about maintaining your own emotional balance and not absorbing the negative emotions of others.
Time boundaries. Gosh, I think this is where so many of us struggle, especially with the way work and life kind of blend together now.
Oh, definitely. Healthy time boundaries are all about how you allocate your time and preventing yourself from becoming overcommitted and, well, overwhelmed.
So, like practical things.
Yeah, practical things.
Yeah.
This could involve setting specific work hours and making a conscious effort to avoid work-related tasks outside of those hours.
Easier said than done sometimes.
Tell me about it. Or it could be about saying no to social invitations when you genuinely need downtime to recharge. It's really about valuing your time as a precious resource and protecting it from being excessively drained by external demands.
And then there are intellectual boundaries. This one might be a bit less obvious for some. What do those look like?
Intellectual boundaries relate to your thoughts, opinions, and beliefs, and ensuring that they are respected by others, even if they don't agree with them.
Ah, okay. Respecting different viewpoints.
Exactly. For example, you might choose not to engage in unproductive arguments on certain topics you know will just go nowhere.
Right. Pick your battles.
Or you might feel it's a violation of your intellectual boundaries if someone constantly interrupts you or dismisses your ideas without really considering them. It's about having your cognitive space and your right to your own thoughts respected.
We also have sexual boundaries, which are obviously crucial for safety, respect, and feeling empowered.
Absolutely. Paramount. Sexual boundaries are about your comfort levels and your explicit consent regarding any form of sexual activity. This involves clearly communicating what you are comfortable with and what you are not.
Clear communication is key.
Essential. And ensuring that consent, which means a clear, enthusiastic yes, is freely given and respected at all times. No ambiguity.
Material boundaries, this covers our possessions, our finances, things like that, right?
Exactly. Material boundaries involve setting limits around your possessions, your finances, your resources. This could be establishing clear rules about lending personal belongings.
Like, please ask before borrowing my tools.
Precisely. Or setting financial boundaries within relationships to prevent feeling taken advantage of, or having clear expectations about shared resources like in a household.
And finally, workplace boundaries. It feels like these have become more and more important as work has become so integrated with our personal lives, especially with, remote work.
You're spot on. Workplace boundaries are the specific limits you set within your professional environment to protect your time, energy, and well-being.
Like leaving work at work.
Ideally, this could include not checking emails after a certain hour, being able to say no to additional tasks when you're already at capacity.
That capacity point again.
Yeah, limiting your availability for meetings outside of core work hours, or even setting boundaries around office gossip and maintaining professional relationships.
It's a really important point that the source has made. These boundaries exist whether we actively communicate them or not, but actually expressing them clearly makes it far less likely that they'll be crossed.
Absolutely. It's about making the unspoken spoken, making things explicit.
Yeah.
Precisely. And from a sociological perspective, boundaries can be seen as those deeply held personal values that determine what we consider acceptable or unacceptable in our interactions.
Our values made visible.
Kind of. It really emphasizes that setting boundaries is ultimately about managing our own responses and behaviors and taking responsibility for our own well-being rather than trying to control how others act.
Okay, so we've got a good handle on what boundaries are and the different types. Now let's get to the core of why they matter so much, especially for our mental health and our overall energy levels. The sources are really clear that these aren't just a nice extra.
No, not at all.
They are absolutely fundamental to our well-being.
That's right. Healthy personal boundaries are truly the foundation of self-care and have a profound impact on our mental, emotional, and even physical health. Think of them as that protective shield we talked about earlier.
A force field.
Yeah, constantly working to safeguard our inner resources. They act like filters,
Hmm.
allowing positive and respectful interactions while keeping out those that are potentially harmful, draining, or just overwhelming.
One of the big benefits highlighted is how boundaries help reduce stress and anxiety. How does that work in practice? It's easy to say reduce stress, but what's the mechanism there?
Well, a significant amount of stress and anxiety comes from feeling responsible for things that are actually outside of our control.
Like other people's moods.
Exactly. Especially the emotions, actions, and thoughts of other people. When you set clear boundaries, you essentially define where your responsibility ends and someone else's begins.
Creating clarity.
Yes. This helps to alleviate stress because you're not constantly trying to manage or fix everyone else's feelings or problems. It prevents that emotional overload and that feeling of being pulled in too many directions at once.
Boundaries also play a crucial role in preventing burnout and resentment, which I think is something that resonates with so many of us who feel constantly stretched thin.
Absolutely. Burnout is huge. If you are consistently giving your time, energy, and emotional capacity without taking the necessary time to replenish those resources.
Pouring from an empty cup.
That's exactly it. It inevitably leads to burnout. That state of emotional, physical, and mental exhaustion caused by prolonged or excessive stress. Boundaries help you prioritize your own needs, protect your time and energy, and create a much healthier balance in your life.
Right.
And this prevents that buildup of resentment that can occur when you constantly feel like you're being taken advantage of or that your own needs are just not being met.
And it seems that having healthy boundaries also really influences how we see ourselves, our self-concept, and our self-worth.
Yes, definitely. Setting and maintaining personal boundaries significantly contributes to a more positive self-concept. When you establish clear limits and assert your needs, you are essentially telling yourself and the world that your well-being matters.
It's an act of self-value.
It is. This act of self-respect and self-advocacy is inherently empowering. It reinforces your sense of worth and empowers you to make choices that align with your values and support your overall well-being, directly boosting your self-esteem.
Finally, it sounds like boundaries give us a greater sense of control and autonomy in our lives, which is so important for our mental health. When you feel in control, you generally feel less anxious and more capable, right?
Exactly. Without healthy boundaries, it's easy to feel overwhelmed, stressed, and like you're constantly being swayed by the needs and demands of others, just reacting all the time.
Yeah, reacting instead of choosing.
Right. Boundaries allow you to take charge of your own life, to prioritize what is truly important to you, and to protect your time and energy. This leads to a much greater sense of personal control and autonomy, which are vital for psychological well-being.
Makes sense.
And as the sources also point out, in social interactions, clear boundaries can actually foster a more relaxed and non-judgmental atmosphere for everyone involved because expectations are clearer, less guessing involved.
Okay, so we understand what boundaries are and why they're so vital for protecting our energy and mental health. Now, for the really practical part, how do we actually go about building this protective shield in different areas of our lives? The sources offer some really useful strategies. Let's start with the workplace, as that's often a major source of energy drain for many people.
Yeah, the workplace. Setting boundaries there is absolutely key for managing your workload, establishing clear communication expectations, and crucially, protecting your personal time.
Okay, workload first. How do we tackle that?
Well, it's essential to learn how to prioritize your tasks effectively and, very importantly, to be able to say no when you have reached your capacity.
That capacity thing again, knowing your limits.
Knowing your limits.
Yeah.
Don't hesitate to clearly communicate your current workload and deadlines to your colleagues and supervisors to help manage expectations. If possible, explore opportunities to delegate tasks when appropriate.
Delegation helps.
It does. Actively block out specific time in your calendar for focused work to minimize interruptions and protect that valuable time. Be honest with your colleagues and superiors about how you're feeling regarding your workload.
Just say, I'm swamped.
Basically, yeah, in a professional way. And when you do need to decline a task, try to offer alternative solutions or suggest who else might be able to help, if you can.
That makes a lot of sense. What about dealing with the constant flow of communication we face at work? Emails, messages, calls. How do we set boundaries around that constant pinging?
Establishing clear communication expectations is vital. Set guidelines for your availability, especially outside of standard working hours. Decide on specific times when you will check and respond to emails and other messages.
Like email batching.
Exactly. And communicate your preferred methods of contact and your typical response times to your colleagues. Try to minimize interruptions during those times when you really need to concentrate.
Turn off notifications?
Yeah, for example, you might turn off notifications for certain periods, or let your team know that for urgent matters, there's a specific channel they should use.
And how can we protect our personal time when work can so easily creep into our evenings and weekends, especially with remote work blurring those lines even more?
Make a conscious effort to take all your designated breaks during the workday to recharge. Don't skip lunch.
Simple but effective.
Right. Actively avoid the habit of overextending yourself by consistently working late or taking work home. Schedule your time off and make sure you actually take it.
Use that vacation time.
Please. Creating a clear physical or digital separation between your work life and your personal life can be incredibly helpful. This might mean using different devices for work and personal tasks, or having a dedicated workspace that you can physically leave at the end of the workday.
Close the door.
Close the door. Also, maintaining professional conduct by keeping your relationships with colleagues professional and avoiding workplace gossip can help establish healthy boundaries. Be upfront and professional in all your communications, and try to establish the boundaries you need early on in a new job or project.
Start as you mean to go on.
Exactly. And when you do need to communicate a boundary, using I statements can be very effective, like, I feel overwhelmed when, instead of, you always give me too much work.
Focus on your experience.
Right. Be prepared and confident in your communication, and if necessary, don't be afraid to use what's known as the broken record technique.
What's that?
It involves calmly and repeatedly stating your boundary without getting drawn into lengthy explanations or arguments. Just keep repeating your point politely but firmly.
Got it. Okay, moving on to family dynamics. These relationships can be so complex, often with long histories and deep emotional ties, which can make setting boundaries feel particularly challenging, right?
Oh yeah. Family stuff can be tricky. Setting boundaries there often requires a lot of sensitivity and clarity. Start by taking some time to really reflect on your own needs, your limits, and your core values within these family relationships.
Know yourself first.
Absolutely. When you need to communicate a boundary, try to do so calmly and clearly, again using I statements to explain how certain behaviors or interactions affect you.
Like, I feel stressed when we only talk about...
Exactly. Be as direct and specific as possible about what you find acceptable and unacceptable. It's also important to set realistic expectations for what these relationships can and should be. Establish those emotional boundaries we talked about, recognizing you're responsible for your feelings, not theirs.
Own your stuff.
Own your stuff. Learn to say no to requests that overextend you or go against your needs without feeling excessive guilt. And remember, it is okay to create some physical or emotional distance and be willing to step away from situations that consistently feel disrespectful or toxic to your well-being.
Or to walk away sometimes.
It is. You could even set boundaries around specific discussion topics that you find draining or harmful. Let's not talk about politics today.
What about specific family members, like parents, siblings, and in-laws? Are there any particular nuances to keep in mind when setting boundaries with them? It can feel different with each.
Yes, definitely. With parents, remember that as an adult, you have the right to make your own decisions and live your life according to your own values.
They're grown now.
You're grown. Take the time to figure out what is truly important to you and advocate for your needs respectfully but assertively. Understand that setting boundaries with parents can sometimes be an ongoing process.
Takes patience.
A lot of patience and consistent communication. It can be helpful to establish clear consequences for when boundaries are crossed and to set limits on the personal information you share and the amount of time you're willing to spend engaging in certain interactions.
Okay. Siblings.
With siblings, start by identifying the specific behaviors or actions that make you uncomfortable or that drain your energy. Communicate your needs in a direct yet kind way, and try to avoid getting drawn into old family dynamics or gossip.
Avoid the old patterns.
Right. Be clear when you express your boundaries and strive to be consistent in upholding them.
And in-laws, that can be a whole other dynamic.
It can. When it comes to in-laws, it's often most effective to communicate with your spouse first and present a united front when establishing boundaries.
Teamwork.
Teamwork is key. Set these boundaries relatively early in the relationship, be clear and specific about your needs and expectations, and try to approach the conversation with respect and empathy for their perspective. Setting boundaries around visits, the level of personal space you need, and involvement in your personal decisions can be particularly important there.
Got it. Finally, let's talk about our social relationships, which can range from very close friendships to more casual acquaintances. How do we set healthy boundaries in this area of our lives?
In social relationships, it's really all about being aware of your own limits and communicating them clearly and kindly. When you need to say no to social commitments.
Which can feel hard. Don't want to miss out or offend.
Totally. Be honest, kind, and direct when you decline invitations. If it feels appropriate and you genuinely want to, you can offer an alternative, like suggesting a different time or activity to connect.
Soften the no sometimes.
If you want to, set boundaries around your availability and make a conscious effort to stick to them without feeling pressured to overextend yourself. Use I statements to explain why you're declining, focusing on your own needs. I'm feeling pretty drained lately and need a quiet night in.
Focus on your needs.
And always express gratitude for the invitation. Try to avoid over-explaining or apologizing excessively for saying no. Sometimes a simple "thank you for the invite, but I won't be able to make it" is sufficient. Practice saying no in low-stakes situations to build your comfort level.
Practice makes, well, easier.
Exactly. When managing friendships, be clear about your boundaries within the friendship. Communicate your needs, wants, and limits openly and honestly. Be firm but kind.
What if a conversation gets difficult?
Don't hesitate to redirect it or even end the conversation if necessary. If a friendship consistently feels too demanding or one-sided, it's okay to take a break or reevaluate the relationship. Ask for what you need directly from your friends and be honest about your capacity and availability for social engagements.
Be upfront about your energy levels.
Right. In more general social interactions, be mindful of your own social energy limits and don't feel obligated to overextend yourself to please others. Communicate your comfort levels with physical touch and personal space. Protect your time and energy by being selective about the commitments you make and be assertive in expressing your preferences and needs. If you notice a boundary being crossed, address it early and calmly to prevent further issues.
Setting boundaries sounds like such a positive thing, but the sources also highlight that we often face challenges when we try to put them in place. It's not always smooth sailing.
Definitely not. There are common hurdles.
What are some of the most common ones people encounter, and what are some practical ways we can overcome them?
Okay, one very common hurdle is the fear of being perceived as selfish or unkind. That selfish label is a big one.
Yeah, nobody wants to be seen that way.
Right. So, to counter this, it's helpful to reframe setting boundaries not as selfish, but as an essential act of self-care and a vital component of your overall well-being. It's about sustainability.
Self-preservation, almost.
Exactly. While it might feel easier in the short term to just say yes to everything, it's crucial to recognize the long-term toll that overcommitment and boundary violations can take on your mental, emotional, and even physical health. Focusing on those potential long-term consequences can provide you with the motivation you need to say no when it's necessary.
Right. Think long-term.
Another significant challenge is the fear of damaging relationships or losing the affection or approval of family and friends.
The fear of rejection or conflict.
It's important to remember that healthy boundaries, when communicated respectfully and effectively, can actually lead to more genuine love and respect in relationships by fostering clearer communication, building trust, and preventing that buildup of resentment.
So it can actually strengthen relationships.
Often, yes. Then there's the worry about being seen as boring or less fun if you're not always available.
FOMO, fear of missing out.
Totally. Remind yourself that setting boundaries allows you to preserve your energy for activities you genuinely enjoy and for spending quality time with the people who truly value you, which will ultimately make your interactions more meaningful when they do happen.
Quality over quantity.
Right. For individuals with codependent tendencies, that ingrained desire to feel needed by others can make it particularly difficult to set healthy limits. It's vital to learn to distinguish between offering genuine support and taking on the entirety of someone else's responsibilities or emotions.
That's a tough distinction sometimes.
It really is.
Guilt and the fear of saying no seem to be major obstacles for many people. How can we navigate those really strong feelings?
Absolutely, they are huge. To overcome feelings of guilt and fear around saying no, it's essential to consistently remind yourself that prioritizing your own well-being is not selfish or wrong. It's necessary.
Give yourself permission.
Yes. Focus on what you have direct control over: your own actions, your own needs, your own boundaries, rather than worrying excessively about others' potential negative reactions. Practicing positive self-talk and affirmations can also be very helpful in reinforcing your right to set boundaries.
What about pushback from others?
Be prepared for it, especially if you have a history of being a people pleaser or if the people in your life aren't used to you setting boundaries.
They might be surprised or even resist.
Exactly. In these situations, it's important to stand firm in your boundaries and be consistent in enforcing them. Remember that someone else's discomfort with your boundaries doesn't invalidate your needs.
Their reaction is their responsibility.
Right. Try to view any initial resistance as an opportunity for growth in your assertiveness and self-respect.
What if someone just isn't sure what boundaries they need or how to say it?
That happens too. Dedicate some quiet time to self-reflection to clearly identify your needs, your limits, and what truly drains your energy. Writing these down and practicing how you will communicate them to others can significantly boost your confidence and clarity.
Practice saying it out loud.
Yeah, even just to yourself or a trusted friend. If you're new to asserting boundaries, start small with lower stakes situations to gradually build your comfort level and your boundary setting muscles.
Don't try to change everything overnight.
No, definitely not. External factors like cultural norms or a workplace culture that doesn't traditionally encourage healthy boundaries can also present challenges.
Right, sometimes the environment works against you.
In these cases, it's helpful to understand your rights as an individual and to familiarize yourself with your company's policies regarding work-life balance and employee well-being. Seek out allies and don't hesitate to ask for support from trusted colleagues, HR, or mentors. Try to frame your boundaries not as a sign of weakness or disengagement, but as something that will ultimately lead to better performance, increased focus, and overall well-being for everyone involved.
Frame it as a positive for the team, too.
Potentially, yes. In the workplace, if expectations aren't clear regarding your tasks, deadlines, or communication norms, proactively seek clarification from your manager to avoid misunderstandings and overcommitment.
Ask for clarity.
And with technology blurring lines, consciously establishing clear digital boundaries, like specific communication times, is essential for protecting your personal time and energy.
Turn off the notifications after hours.
Yes, avoid the tendency to over-explain or over-apologize for your boundaries. Often, a simple and direct explanation is all that's needed. Sometimes, just saying no, without a lengthy justification, is perfectly acceptable.
No is a complete sentence.
It is. Resist the urge to give in or weaken your boundaries when others resist them or try to persuade you. Maintain consistency and firmness, reminding yourself that your needs and well-being are important.
Stay consistent.
But also, finally, it's important to be aware that your boundaries might sometimes be too rigid, preventing healthy connection and flexibility. Allow for flexibility and compromise where it feels appropriate and doesn't compromise your core needs, while still holding firm on your non-negotiable limits.
So not completely inflexible either, finding the balance.
Always finding the balance.
We've talked about the challenges, but what are the really positive outcomes of successfully setting and maintaining healthy boundaries? The sources emphasize how it significantly boosts our self-esteem. How does that connection actually work?
The connection between healthy boundaries and a strong sense of self-esteem is really powerful and fundamental. Setting boundaries is, at its core, an act of self-respect and self-care.
Respecting yourself.
Exactly. By establishing clear limits and asserting your needs, you are sending a clear message both to yourself and to others that your well-being, your time, and your overall needs are valuable and worthy of protection.
You're telling yourself you matter.
You are. This act of self-advocacy is inherently empowering, giving you a greater sense of control over your life, your emotions, and your decisions. This increased feeling of control directly contributes to a stronger sense of self-worth and confidence.
Taking the reins.
Yeah. Furthermore, healthy boundaries act as a protective barrier, shielding you from being taken advantage of, mistreated, or emotionally drained by others. Feeling safer and more secure in your interactions strengthens your self-esteem and fosters a deeper sense of inner security and self-reliance.
It sounds like having boundaries allows us to be more authentic in our relationships, and that in itself must also tie into how we feel about ourselves.
Absolutely, that's a huge part of it. When you feel secure in your limits and know that you can assert your needs without fear of negative consequences, you are much more likely to express your thoughts and feelings honestly and openly.
Less fear of judgment.
Right, without fear of judgment or negative repercussions. This ability to be your true self in your interactions fosters greater self-acceptance, which is a cornerstone of healthy self-esteem.
Being truly you.
Yeah, respecting your own boundaries also inherently means valuing your own time and energy, and that in itself enhances your self-respect. As you consistently practice setting and upholding your boundaries, you send a clear and consistent message to yourself and to the world that you are worthy of respect and consideration.
It reinforces your worthiness.
It does. And as a result, you are more likely to be treated with respect by others, which in turn further solidifies and strengthens your sense of self-esteem over time. It becomes a positive feedback loop.
Beyond just our own self-esteem, how do boundaries affect the quality of our relationships with others? It might seem counterintuitive. You'd think putting up limits would create distance.
That's a very common and understandable misconception, a really important one to address. While some might initially perceive boundaries as creating distance or barriers, they actually foster healthier and higher quality relationships in the long run.
How so?
Instead of building walls, boundaries help to create safe and respectful spaces within relationships where everyone feels seen, heard, and valued. Clear boundaries lay a solid groundwork for mutual respect, trust, and more effective and healthier communication patterns in all types of connections.
Romantic, family, friends?
All of them, whether they are romantic, familial, or friendships.
So, setting boundaries actually helps prevent problems and build stronger connections in the long run.
Precisely. By establishing clear limits and expectations, boundaries help prevent the buildup of resentment and discomfort that often arises from unspoken or unmet needs in our interactions. We've all felt that, right?
Oh yeah, the simmering resentment.
Exactly. They also encourage a greater sense of autonomy and personal responsibility within relationships, which reduces the likelihood of codependent patterns where one person feels overly responsible for the other's well-being.
Healthier independence within connection.
Yes. Setting boundaries effectively clarifies the expectations that each person has within the relationship, leading to fewer misunderstandings, less conflict, and a greater sense of security and stability for everyone involved.
Less guesswork.
Less guesswork. Furthermore, actively respecting each other's boundaries is a fundamental sign of love, care, and consideration. It communicates that you value the other person's well-being as much as your own.
It's a form of caring.
It really is. Boundaries also help maintain a healthy sense of personal space, both physically and emotionally, which is vital for individual well-being within the context of a relationship. Ultimately, open and honest communication about personal boundaries is a cornerstone of strong and lasting relationships,
Makes sense.
fostering deeper intimacy and a more meaningful connection. In many ways, the ability of individuals within a relationship to both set and respect healthy boundaries can be seen as a key indicator, like a litmus test of the overall health, maturity, and quality of that connection.
Interesting. A litmus test.
Yeah. Those who truly value your well-being will not only respect your boundaries, but will also likely appreciate the clarity and honesty that they bring to the relationship.
To make this even more concrete and relatable, can we look at some real-life examples of how boundary setting might play out in different areas of our lives? Sometimes just hearing a specific scenario can make it click.
Absolutely. Examples help.
Yeah.
In the workplace, it could be an employee politely stating, "I won't be checking emails after 7 p.m. to protect my personal time."
Clear and simple.
Or someone declining to take on an additional project because their current workload is already at full capacity, saying something like, "My plate is full right now, so I can't take that on."
Saying no to more work.
Right. It might also look like an individual blocking out specific focus time in their calendar and communicating to their colleagues, "Please don't interrupt me during these hours unless it's a genuine emergency."
Protecting focus.
Even during a job interview, a candidate might set a boundary by clearly stating their expected working hours and availability. Using that broken record technique could look like calmly repeating, "Thank you for the offer, but I'm not able to take on any more tasks at this time," when someone keeps pushing.
Sticking to your guns.
Yeah. Or, in a situation where an urgent issue arises late in the day, someone might agree to work on it but set a limit. "Okay, I could work on this until 6 p.m., but then I have a prior commitment."
Agreeing with limits. What about within our families? What do boundaries look like there?
In family dynamics, it might look like an adult child stating, "Mom, I love talking to you, but if you start criticizing my partner, I'm going to have to end the call."
Setting a consequence.
Yes. It could be a family agreeing to set a specific time limit for holiday gatherings to prevent exhaustion. "Let's plan for the party to wrap up around 9 p.m. this year."
Managing energy levels.
Right. It might involve establishing a clear boundary against gossiping. "I'm not comfortable talking about Aunt Sue behind her back."
Stopping negativity.
Parents agreeing on a consistent curfew with their teenager is a form of boundary setting. Or, in a more challenging scenario, an individual might limit discussion topics with a parent or sibling. Dad, let's agree not to discuss politics when we get together.
Steering clear of trigger topics. And finally, in our social lives with friends and acquaintances.
In social relationships, it could be someone communicating, actually, I prefer a handshake, when someone goes in for a hug they're not comfortable with.
Physical space.
Yeah. It might involve declining a social invitation, but then proactively suggesting an alternative. I can't make it Saturday, but how about we grab coffee next week?
Offering an alternative.
Setting an emotional boundary might look like someone gently but firmly stating to a friend, hey, I care about you, but I don't have the emotional capacity to listen to venting about this situation right now, unless we can talk about solutions.
Limiting emotional dumping.
Exactly. Addressing disrespectful language directly and calmly. Please don't use that word around me.
Yeah.
Or, in the digital realm, it could even involve blocking unsolicited or unwanted content online to protect your mental space.
Digital boundaries, too. Those real-life examples are so helpful in visualizing how we can actually put boundaries into practice. So, to bring everything together, what's the most important message you want our listeners to take away from this deep dive into boundaries for energy protection?
The key message is this. Setting healthy personal boundaries is not a luxury. It is absolutely essential for achieving a sense of balance, protecting your valuable energy, and nurturing your overall well-being.
Not optional, but essential.
Essential. Recognize the vital role that these boundaries play in safeguarding your mental and emotional health. By understanding and actively implementing effective strategies for setting boundaries in your work life, within your family, and in your social interactions, you can lead a more empowered, less drained, and ultimately more fulfilling existence.
And while it might take some conscious effort, practice, and maybe even a little discomfort at first to establish and maintain these boundaries,
It often does.
the long-term rewards sound like they're incredibly worthwhile.
They absolutely are. Overcoming those initial challenges and any potential resistance you might encounter ultimately leads to increased self-esteem, a greater sense of inner peace, and the cultivation of healthier, more respectful, and more authentic relationships in all areas of your life.
Better relationships, better self-esteem.
Yes. Embracing the practice of setting healthy boundaries is truly one of the most valuable investments you can make in yourself and your well-being.
So, as you go about your week, I want to leave you with this thought. Consider just one area in your life where establishing a clearer boundary, even a small one, could bring you the most immediate positive change in your energy levels and your overall sense of well-being.
Just one small thing.
Reflect on what you've learned in our deep dive today and ask yourself, what is one small, manageable step I can take this week towards building that stronger, more protective, invisible shield around my energy?